We're looking at rising inequality in the world, and we will definitely bring it home to Nigeria. My guests are joining me right now. Nonso Obikili, an economist, is to my far right. So good to have you on the program. Welcome
Happy to
again.
be here
Happy
again.
New Year, isn't it?
Yeah, Happy New Year. First time this year.
Yeah. First time this year. Why is this seeming as if we've seen? Okay, we saw before the Christmas.
Just before the holidays.
Yeah. How was your holiday? I hope it was good.
It was interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Your choice of words this morning. They don't mind. We were saying something before we came on. Okay, Kodi Ojukwu is a political economist. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Nancy.
How are you doing? Your first time on the show?
Sure. Yeah.
Apparently. So
yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Where do I start from? We're expecting another guest to join us from Skype, Paul Alage. We're trying to connect him. Let's see if we can. I'll definitely keep you up to speed with that in a jiffy. But let's get started. My intro. Yesterday, of course, Davos. The world's billionaires are gathered there, world's business leaders, political leaders, heads of state. Trump over there, European Central Bank president, a lot of them. I think about 3,000 delegates at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And it's a tradition, just before Davos begins, Oxfam released their inequality report. When I saw that report yesterday, I was like, But let me start with you, Nonso. What do you have to say?
Well, I think from a publicity perspective, it's good timing, because if you have all these billionaires and world leaders in one particular place, then you want that issue to be on the agenda. And them releasing their report always puts the issue on the agenda, which is a good thing. I think part of the strategy is to be a bit alarmist, to make it, seem a bit more explosive, to make the report explosive, so that people pay attention and that it can get high on the agenda. And that always seems to work. And of course, to be fair, inequality is a big issue. It's a big problem. For many countries, it's the problem. And I think part of Oxfam strategy is to kind of bring that to the front burner so that we can talk about it and we can start to see how to address it. Because of course, high inequality is not good for the economy, it's not good as a social ideal. And it's becoming more and more relevant, to put it that way.
Global inequality, for me, when I saw the report yesterday, when I read it, I was like, if you're not coming from, that Oxfam is exaggerating this, because a lot of people have also said they're overstating the issue, they're exaggerating the issue. But if you're not coming from this perspective, and you just take a look at that report and read it for what it is. For what I said, when I saw that yesterday, I was like, really, global inequality is on steroids. What do you think?
On steroids?
Yes, it's on steroids right now. It's out of control.
Yes, it is. The much I seem to see from Oxfam's point of view. Yeah. But I actually also believe they exaggerated what they said. That's what I saw from them. But I think they're still trying to preempt what will happen at Davos, or what will come out from Davos meetings. The global inequality that's existing before now has been there. It has never stopped. And I don't even see it coming down, even with the taxing they are projecting. But I think the inequality in wealth distribution, one way or the other, seems to work for capitalism. That's where I see it.
Nonso, you have a contrary view to what he said, because when it's measured capitalism, I did mention it too at the beginning of the program. In fact, when I was looking at the report yesterday, I was asking myself the question, and I also tried to answer it, if capitalism has failed.
Well, so I think it's very important to distinguish between wealth inequality, which is what we actually measure, income inequality, and then poverty. So yes, it's true, wealth inequality has gone up a lot in the past few decades. But at the same time, poverty has dropped a lot in the world over the past few decades. Maybe except in Nigeria and some African countries.
Yeah, because we are the poverty capital.
All over the world, poverty has dropped, right? And so, on the one hand, you can say, yes, inequality has risen. But on the other hand, poverty has also dropped a lot, which has led to an improvement in the quality of lives of many billions of people, right? And so, yes, you want to tackle poverty on the one hand, but you don't want to get back to zero inequality where the majority are poor, right? And so, I mean, I always try to, I think we should always try to find a balance. I think there's always going to be inequality. There has been inequality in the world since we know. And you want to always try to make sure that everybody has the same opportunities to get to the top of the ladder, to put it that way. But at the same time, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I always get a bit nervous when inequality is used as the stick to beat capitalism with, when no one actually knows what capitalism is in the broad scheme of things. It's just it's a label attached to everything that people think is bad about markets. Right?
Okay.
But markets are good in some instances, some bad in some instances. Freedoms are good in some instances, freedom are bad in some instances. So just labeling it as capitalism, I think, is always a bit of a
so for my question, the question that I asked, would you say is off if capitalism has failed? Because indeed there's capitalism.
No, I don't think it has failed. I think we could be better, and I think there are many parts of the world that are still lagging behind. And of course, it's always a bit unnerving when you hear the amount of wealth that the richest, few percent have. Human beings tend to be jealous, right? If you see your neighbor doing so well, then all of a sudden your okay income doesn't look so good, right? And so seeing the amount of wealth that the richest have amassed is always unnerving, right? And of course, governments need to be seen to try to tackle that, especially because, social mobility is very difficult.
Yeah.
If you're born into wealth, you're much more likely to be wealthy. If you are born in the right country, you are much more likely to have a higher income. And that seems like a very unfair arrangement. And so tackling that is always something that I would always support. But I don't think we should go as far as trying to demonize wealth, right? It's not a crime to be wealthy.
Yeah.
If you made your wealth the right way, though.
Yeah. It's not a crime to be wealthy. Yeah. Yes, it's not a crime. But let me just stick with you a bit with what you said. There is that difference. There's a difference between inequality and poverty, isn't it? But there's a link. Is there a link? You know why I'm asking you? Because I've asked different scholars or different scholars of economics and all of that. Are you of the view that inequality and poverty are almost the same or different?
Well, they are very different. I think they're different, but they are of course linked. If you look at the caliber of billionaires in many countries, especially in low-income countries, the path to their wealth is always opposed to the best thing for the economy. You have people who create monopolies and massive wealth. At the same time, those kind of policies kind of limit the productivity of the regular citizens. And so there's, of course, a link, right? And that's clear. But if you look at the top 10 richest people in the world, you can't really say that their wealth is due to preferential government policies or due to some kind of policy that limits the productivity of everybody else. In many cases, it's due to innovations that change the world. Right? You think of the Microsoft, the Facebooks,
Jeff Bezos,
Amazon's,
Zuckerberg.
most of their wealth is due to innovations that change the world. And you can't really say that government created that platform for them. You can't really say that their innovations have caused poverty or limited people's potential. But of course, in many parts of the world, inequality is directly linked to government policy, which is directly linked to poverty. And so you can't extricate the two.
Okay. I see you like nodding your head. Perhaps you were also disagreeing with him a bit. But let me ask this question to perhaps what's the other thing you want to say. Can capitalism be a bit more responsible to consider perhaps like the health of the society? Because just like you said, we shouldn't demonize wealth. Everybody wants to be rich. I think, who sang it? Is it 50 Cent? Get rich or die trying. But get rich the right way, not the Yahoo Plus way. So can capitalism be a bit more responsible?
Generally, it's actually responsible in its own particular way, because when people see need in the system and they pursue it, because of pursuing it, brings wealth to them. So it actually helps the system, helps people. But then the benefit they have from accrues to the persons who are, even everybody talk about as in the world are capitalist by nature or by the things they do. But I look at the issue of the failing part of capitalism. I see the incursion of socialist concepts as being an aid to the system, not really fighting capitalism, but helping the people to break down on inequalities. like you said, inequality poverty is dropping. It's because of those kind of social concepts that people, like you see what they discuss in Davos, for instance, the issue of investing in health. For goodness sake, who are the people in the health? Doctors, medical doctors, nurses. They may not be billionaires, but they are making their life better off. So breaking down on poverty, reducing inequality, meanwhile, is still building up the capitalist incomes anyway. So I don't see it as failing, but I see it as a way also helping the system.
So can the elites change, or yes, can they change the state of the world in terms of, like if you see what Microsoft's founder is doing, there's Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation, a few of them, Warren Buffett, and some others. Even Dangote has also joined them, you know, because show me your friends, I'll tell you. So if he's rolling with the likes of Bill Gates, he's investing more money in HDI, human development, you know. Can these elites, those few elites, can they really change the state of the world? Because, for example, what they are discussing in Davos, let's state of the world. Can they change, can they improve the state of the world? Yes, that's the word, improve.
Well, I mean, they have the money to start with, and they have the power and influence. A lot of presidents run to Davos not because they want to go on holiday, but because they want to hobnob with these people, get some money, have them influence policy and all that. So they have the potential to make an impact. But I think you cannot put the responsibility only on the billionaires, because human beings are still human beings. Human beings still always try to work in their best interest, right? Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation might have all this money to spend on health, on education, but they're not going to do anything that might torpedo their wealth, right? The maintaining their wealth is always still a part of the equation. And so you cannot expect the billionaires to push for a more equal system if that would mean their wealth starts to shrink, right? And so you can't, even though, you know, a lot of them recognize their intentions and their impacts, and they make very big impacts, you cannot remove the role of government and people in demanding and pushing for a more equal society. I
will come to the roles of government in a bit, but let's try as much as possible to analyze that report yesterday. 2,153 billionaires have more wealth than 4.6 billion people. 22 richest men have more wealth than all the women in Africa, including me. 326 million African women. 22 richest men are richer than
all the put together.
Yes, all the women put together in Africa. What does that tell you? Yes.
It still comes back to the drive for the wealth these people have for where they've gotten to already. But the women themselves, I mean, looking at the perspective of the number of people who have made such money, more than a bigger, higher percentage of the population, I see a drive that's needed. Now, you mentioned the issue of the people who are already rich among us in Nigeria, for instance. The man is working his own. I don't see the disparity in numbers of the people who are wealthy as a threat. I see it as a push to do something better. Now, for the women, not women, it's the population generally speaking, the rich inevitably gets richer, and the works they do makes money for them. I still stand that it's a natural drive in men to be jealous, and in jealous make better their life. That's where I see it.
What do you have to say about this? What's your answer to it? 22 richest men, more than 326 million of us women.
Well, I try not to focus on the numbers because there's lots of issues with the measurement. It's very easy to measure the wealth of the richest. You know what companies they own. It's not on the stock exchange. You can calculate the value very quickly. It's very, very difficult to measure wealth once you start to get to the bottom of the ladder. How do you value cows people have, or land, property, televisions, all these things that are assets, that are wealth, that can be sold for money. So I don't focus on the numbers.
But when they sell all of that, it's not up to...
The thing is,
yes, no. So we're talking about people
if
any less than $5.50.
If we don't know, then we shouldn't try to be biased one way or the other, right? If you go to my village, for example, a lot of poor people have land. Land is valuable, right? If you decide to sell it and move, yes, their incomes will collapse and they might not have anything to do, but land is an asset that they can use, and if you wanted to measure their value, you would have to measure it, right? So we don't have any proper measurements for wealth at the bottom of the table. For income, we have a lot more measurements, and it still kind of tells the same story. Income inequality is very high. But for wealth, we don't know. So I don't try to focus on the numbers. Maybe 20 people have more wealth than half the people in Africa. I don't try
what
to
is it now about not focusing on the number?
On the message. The message is that wealth inequality is a problem. And that's the message I focus on.
Now, apart from the message, and the message is also pictorial, because if we come back home, a lot of people are poor. That's here in Nigeria. Of course, we are the poverty headquarters. That's also a statistic. Some will say, no, it's also exaggerated. But that's a statistics. I think 2017 or so, we've not moved from that. So would you, not really focusing on the numbers, but it's there. We're seeing it every day. We're seeing the symptoms. We're seeing everything. So isn't it something for us to be bothered about?
Yes. And like I said earlier on, poverty is very different from inequality, especially wealth inequality. Right? Tackling poverty and tackling inequality, they are linked in some way, but in other ways, the agenda is very different. If you think of Nigeria, for example, just in the absolute amount of stuff we actually do as a country as a whole, it's still very low. So even if we were to transform Nigeria into a completely equal society, we would probably still be poor relative to everybody else. Right? So for us, the agenda to reduce inequality is good. It should be ideal, but becoming more productive, reducing poverty is a more we should focus more on reducing poverty, which is a different question from inequality. So I think we need to take those kind of nuances into account. Yes, globally, as poverty has fallen, the focus has shifted to inequality because people are no longer poor in many parts of the world. Now they care about how wealthy am I relative to everybody else. But here, we still have a lot of poor people. Poverty should still be our focus. Inequality should be a focus, a secondary focus, but poverty should be the main focus.
How do you now link that vis-a-vis the numbers which we've seen, which you said, just take a look at the message. However, if we're coming back to Nigeria, a lot of women are poor. So whether we like it or not, you see some men or a man doing the same job, a woman doing the same job. The man is paid higher than the woman. You see, yes, that's what it is, yes. You see the woman is paid less than the man. I don't know whether negotiating skills or so. Women perhaps are not strong enough to negotiate or to ask for better or fairer wages. That's another issue. You also take a look at women doing a lot of stuff. How do you see, how do you think we should ease? I'm torn now in between inequality and poverty. You understand what I'm saying?
I mean, in Nigeria, they happen to be linked.
Linked,
because when we see a lot of government policy, there are policies that tend to favor the rich and wealthy against the poor and suffering, right? If you think of policies that try to restrict people's access to cheap imported food, for example, so that we can produce more. Many economists have shown, even if you have those kind of policies, even if there's more production, they tend to be captured by people who have bigger farms, people who are able to invest in rice mills, people who have money.
Processing, the
right?
value
people
chain.
Who have the money to invest in processing. Yeah. Whereas the people who are at the bottom of the ladder, who just want to eat cheap food, suffer the most. Yes. Right?
So it's like the middleman to the top end person that.
Yeah. So we have a lot of policies that tend to favor the wealthy and keep the poor a bit poorer, which kind of links the two. So there's a link between the two here, and because of that, there's a case to be made that government can do something to kind of rebalance the equation, to rebalance things towards the poor. But I mean, again, like I said, even if you happen to have a very equal Nigeria, we will still have poverty, loss of poverty, because as a whole, we're just not very productive. And so we need to start to get more productive. We need the poor to become more productive, to start to earn better incomes, to start to produce more food, or whatever it is that they do, and not focus directly on how we can rebalance, how we can tax the wealthy, but how we can get the poor to be more productive. And of course, there's a link between the two. Education is a big part of people getting more productive, and to fund education, you need money from somewhere. And we talk a lot about how people don't pay taxes. We start to collect more taxes from these wealthy individuals. So there's a link between the two, but we need to be place of focus on what the objective is. The objective should be to reduce poverty, to improve quality of life for ordinary citizens, not just to reduce inequality for inequality's sake.
Okay, something coming to my mind, I hope I remember in a bit. Inequality, minimum wage discussion. Because that links to inequality. I hope I remember, so that we'll come back to it in a bit. But I want to ask you, what do you think the role of government should be, especially here in Nigeria? We've seen the social safety nets, the cash, conditional cash transfer, social spending. How do you think that spending perhaps on the poor now to make the country perhaps more equal should be more qualitative and dynamic? I know why I asked that question, dynamic.
Dynamic. Coming back to the what you mooted, which is the issue of the income of the populace, like wages, whether waged by the government or by the private employers rather. I see the build from the perspective of the government playing a role there. Government in Nigeria has played a role before in declaring minimum wage for people, for government and government generally speaking. But then, what are private people? The income making, the people making income in their place of work helps to build up their, break down the inequality in the system that helps them stand up as individuals. But I'm looking at what government can do. My friend Nonso just mentioned the issue of policies that help the rich get richer, or the policies inevitably help the rich get richer. But I see from a different perspective. Now, I don't think people can become richer by working harder. I think people can become richer by being innovative. The same people who dig ground every day, if they dig deeper in the ground, will make it richer. They won't get anything. Instead, they may have to develop how to use shovel or some kind of digging system to dig faster places to make money. Even those who are producing things in the forest, producing yams and gari and rice everywhere, unless they become innovative in getting to the market, they may not get any richer. The policy government might make may not say from today everybody must pay 10 million naira per plate of rice if you're going to buy from one village. No, they can't make that policy. The policy inevitably is how can we make better income in what we have.
Okay, let me come to Nonso. The question earlier, minimum wage versus income inequality versus poverty reduction, all linked, isn't it? Then the B part of the question is also what I asked them, in terms of what can the role of government be at this time in creating qualitative, dynamic social spending safety nets. Why I use dynamic is, for example, in Brazil, there's the social spending part of it. I think they call it Bolsa Familia. It has helped reduce poverty, but inequality is also there and all of that. So you have, pockets of things like this happening in some countries.
Okay. I think sort of minimum wages are not a bad thing. I think in many instances they are good at creating a floor so that people don't exploit the very poorest. And there's been a lot of talk about how it increases unemployment and all that, but research on that is kind of mixed around the world. So inequality is not a bad thing. Social programs are also not a bad thing in theory, right? They're a good way to rebalance the scales, to incentivize people to invest in things like education, and just to make sure that people have the basic needs to keep surviving. So not a bad thing. But you can't take all that out from the context of the wider economy, right? For Nigeria example, we all know what the government financial position is. It's struggling, right? It's struggling to pay current salaries. It's having to borrow just to meet recurrent expenditure. So in that context, is raising minimum wage particularly a good thing? Well, not necessarily, because even though the people who get the money might get better, if the government goes bankrupt, that's worse for everybody else, right? And so you might end up in a worse position overall. Social spending is also kind of the same theory. We know we have, 67% poverty in Nigeria, based on the last time we measured, which means that the government cannot afford to pay everybody who's poor. That's just a reality. So they might reach 1 million people here, 500,000 people there, but the remaining 60, 70 million are on their own. And so a strategy to reducing poverty, social spending is not it for sure. It's kind of like insurance, right? You insure against an event that may not happen, that mostly does not happen. But if you have to insure against an event that happens to 7,000 people, then everything breaks down. So social spending is good on its own in theory, but it's not going to be a solution to our poverty problems, not even close, because we just have poverty that's so high, that we need to focus on actually improving productivity.
And that was why I chose that word, dynamic. Because if the government sees that social spending is not working or is more expensive at the time you're struggling, you're trying to get out of recession, can you actually also be dynamic with that spending, and what would you do to catalyze the economy? Because perhaps one way of reducing poverty is economic growth, but economic growth that is inclusive, So at what point can the government get dynamic at this time? What can they do? Specific things they can do?
Well, he made a very good point, right? It's not just about working harder. If you dig harder, you're not going to necessarily make more money. It's about being innovative, being more productive. And we know that in the medium to long term, education is really what counts for how productive a society is, what people know how to do. It's not just about going to school and getting right results, or going and getting diploma from here or that people from there. It's about things that people know how to do. That's where I think that the focus needs to be. If you look at agriculture, for example, which is the largest employer of labor in Nigeria, we still have farming practices that are very, very poor.
Obsolete.
Which means that our yields are very, very poor relative to everybody else. But if you teach people better farming practices, teach people how to work the soil, how to control water resources so that they can get more yield, and they get richer in a sustainable way. Because once they learn how to produce more, given the same resources, that can keep on going on and on. Okay. The environment permitting, of course.
Okay, let's try and get Paul Alage on the phone lines. We've been trying with Skype since the network issues. Paul, are you there? Welcome to the morning. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. Welcome to the program. We've been discussing for the past, I think, 25 minutes or thereabouts. Yes. On the reports by Oxfam, have you seen it?
I'm studying the report.
Okay.
I'm started studying it.
Okay. As an economist, what's your own view? Because if you talk to 10 economists, you will have 10 different versions. That's what I've learned. Just like you talk to 10 lawyers, that putting the law from 10 different perspectives. So what's your own perspective of the Oxfam report about global inequality out of control?
Yeah, well, global inequality, as really indicated, a very minute part of what's population percentage still has wealth of the world. And for me, global inequality is a function of how governments have carefully redistributed income and the strategy governments across the world have used to eradicate poverty. Now, there is a difference between poverty eradication and wealth creation. What most countries, particularly countries with unsatisfactory Gini coefficient, have done most of the time is they want to elevate poverty without consciously building wealth. So it is a laudable thing to want to elevate poverty by bringing programs, but those programs themselves will not bring the people to prosperity. On one hand, these people we want to give social package, social program for, they still keep reoccurring as those within poverty brackets in our country. What we need to do as black people and beyond black people, even Latinos, people around the globe where people are really very poor, is to design programs that will take those people beyond poverty to some level of prosperity. And I've seen government try to collect more from the poor, from the rich, and give to the poor. But if these poor don't have capacity to recreate wealth, whatever you are giving to them, the rich will create them, and they will buy it. They will decide how much they want to pay. If you are not buying from a rich guy, you go to another rich person. The question is, which I want to have people viewing this program right now at home, or they are viewing it on the internet, or whichever platform they are viewing this program for. The television that they are using to watch, or the phone Who is making it? Is it rich or poor? So the house where they live right now, who provides the cement for them? Is it rich or poor? If you are using the network, we are calling now from kilometers, hundreds or thousands of kilometers apart. Who provide that service for us? Until governments of nations will realize that the prosperity gain is in numbers, and they can ensure those that are poor can provide a service that more and more people will buy. You see, Forbes magazine, Forbes from time to time review the richest people in the world. I realized I've not seen the richest man in the last 20 years manufacturing most expensive things, such as private jet or aeroplane. What they do most of the time may be software, may be provision of salt, sugar, things that large number of people consume. And guess who they are targeting? Bottom of the pyramid, the middle class and the poor. So the way up is to satisfy, give poor what they want to consume. Government can then design policy around this so that those that are poor can also start giving value. My favorite book says, the poor you will always have. But you don't have to be that poor person who will always be available to remain poor and be below, say, the poverty line.
Okay. Let's bring in Nnaji. We've both heard what's
Yeah, sure.
What do you think? Paul, still hang on there with us, yes?
Okay.
No, go ahead, yeah.
See, whenever we discuss the issue of poverty and inequality, it makes me think again, who really are the poor? Because the poor, when we say who is poor, who cannot ordinarily be sure, a very low income, not able to satisfy most of his needs or her needs, that's the poor person. But inequality looks at the richest compared with the poorest.
Income distribution
System.
Wealth distribution,
okay.
Yeah.
Now, there is a system I know where everybody pays, I think 40% tax or something like that. But everybody has all medical supplies, most things are provided by the government.
Yeah. In Nordic countries, apparently.
That's it. So in such circumstance, you wouldn't call those people poor, but there's still billionaires among them. There's inequality among them. Now, but in Nigeria, like I pointed out just now, there are people who ordinarily can't have good meals. That's poor. How then do we bring this poor out of this state? There's a write-up I read some time ago from a country that was being fed by International Food Organization. And after 10 years of being fed, the poverty dropped substantially. Increased rather. They became more poor in the system because they keep collecting food. So the innovation, the desire or the push to work harder dropped. Like our Nigeria as a nation, I don't think the issue of giving people money is a solution to the problem. As far as Nigerians like good things. And whatever you put out as the price, people can buy it. They rather work harder to achieve it. So if the system, can I say, just supply what they are, even if you put a higher scale, people will scale it. When we had GSM came to Nigeria the first time at turn of 99, one SIM card, SIM card was how much?
About 60, fell to 30.
People bought it. Most people had it, or rather, many people had it. Now, currently, almost every Dick and Harry, even elementary school students have phones. The cost of buying SIM card had dropped, but the cost of phone calls had not dropped. But people afford it. They make calls, they send text, and it's still there. So the issue of the poverty this time is for particular Nigerians. If you push us harder, we'll work harder.
Okay. Nonso, you listen to what Paul's.
Yes.
Do you have?
Well, I think we should always be very careful to blame poor people for being poor. In many instances, we are a product of our environment. If you are born in a random village in, let's say, Burundi, you don't have an education, you don't have any kind of access to the rest of the world, no matter how hard you work, you will probably remain poor because you're a product of an environment. I like to give the example, we're having this program in English now, but none of us really chose that, right? We are speaking English because we are a product of the environment we're in, and English is what is done, and we run with it. So we should be careful, we should be very careful for assuming that people can just lift themselves out of poverty if they work hard enough. Not to say that hard work is not important, it's very important, hard work counts, but there's a lot else that counts as well. And I think if you think of one of the things that is most important for breaking out of poverty as an individual, education, most of that is beyond your control. You're born, you don't decide what school to go to at 3 years old. Someone does it for you, right? You don't decide how much to invest in your learning at 18 years old. Someone does it for you. And so if you're lucky enough, you can break out of that. If you're lucky enough to live in a society where government enforces education for everybody and everybody gets good quality education, quality health, then it increases the likelihood that you will not end up in poverty. But if you're in a society where there is no provision of public education, there's no provision of health, you happen to be in a poor family with no access to these things, then you will most likely remain poor. If you people might break out, of course, there's always outliers, but most of you remain poor. And so there's a personal incentive, yes, but there's also a social incentive.
So whose responsibility should it be to raise people out of poverty? And now we'll begin to talk about the inequality issue.
Yeah, I think government has to play a role, especially in education, in learning. One of the things that we figured out is most important for a child's capacity to learn, for example, is the kind of nutrition they get from when they are born to when they're, I think, 4 years or so. That is completely beyond the child's control. And in some places, parents are too poor to give their children, their babies, good quality nutrition. Those are the kind of things that government needs to be able to do and say, look, we need to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to break out of poverty. That everybody has nutrition as a child, everybody has access to basic education, and then from there, run with it, right? So you cannot remove the role of government in all this. Government needs to provide those key public goods that enable people to break out of poverty, enable people to compete.
Paul, let me come back to you. Are you still there? Is Paul still there? Okay. 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 I just wanted to ask, because if you talk about inequality, you're also looking at income. Is there a way that we can create better earning opportunities? That brings me back. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
There are ways to create better income opportunities. But what we should look at today is that what is your rate of earning? For Zuckerberg, his rate of earning is per second. As soon as this program finishes, those that are glued to their television, they want to see who is chatting them up on Facebook, or they want to see who is chatting them up on Twitter. Who is talking to me on WhatsApp? So these people can generate money from hard payment that is coming to them. A person who works with government only has a major source of income within 30 days. It would be unfair to think that we can distribute income enough for those who earn income once a month to the person who earns his income per second. For some people, the income comes on daily basis. For some, it is on weekly basis. Now, what is the volume of work comes in, either per second, per minute, per week, per day, or per month? Some people, their income comes once in 3 months. Some will depend on transfer earning. Now, to now say, how do we improve income? Is either going to come through individual household, or it's going to come through firms, or come through government. Government is unique among the 3 agents of government because it can actually help people to improve their income. Now, when we talk about distribution of income, most likely we'll compare the rural people and urban poor with those that are rich and are influential. Larger percentage of population that are rich, they live in the city. We have some urban poor and we have people who live in rural areas, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, most of which are very poor. So what do we do? How do we connect the city prosperity to those that are in urban area? It's for deployment of infrastructure. Deployment of infrastructure will come by government realizing that it does not have the capacity to develop infrastructure from Jekwe State or Arkila somewhere in Sokoto State up to everywhere in Nigeria. It is not possible. What government needs to do is for those that are rich to say that their prepayment to government in form of taxes, they invest directly on infrastructure, so that the person somewhere in Ohimini, in Benue State, can now have increase in rate of revenue generation from his farm, because the roads are relatively better. If he can sell 20 tons, right now in a month he can sell 30 tons or 40 tons. He can afford to send his children to school from profit of extra, so that they don't need to go through the farming method or farming mechanism they've had. They can also send more harvest to household that wants to consume food or that wants to consume food items. So government is very central in helping people to generate income without necessarily employing more people. Another one which of course government will do, and private sector will do, particularly through foreign direct investment, it will be power generation. When there is power, my grandmother, everyone's grandmother or father or so ever may be, and living in a rural community, we depend less on living in the city.
Okay.
And the new economy will be generated. Value of real estate in those environments will increase, which means although the real estate, we have more revenue and we expand our community. Urbanized or urban renewal of some sort.
Okay, Paul, I think
or using magic of some sort, we're going to have prosperity in Africa without deliberating solving problems, infrastructural problem, power problem, education problem, health problem.
Okay.
I'm afraid we may not be able to achieve.
Okay, Paul, I'm going to cut you here because we have to go now. We really have to go now. We really have to go now. Okay. Okay, I just had to cut Paul because we have less than 2 minutes to, to wrap up the show. What are your closing remarks? What are your closing thoughts?
I think we need to think structurally as a country. We need to begin to produce more valuable things. Rice is fine, but can we produce things that are more valuable than rice? And we need to do those things in places that actually employ people. So I think structurally, that's the challenge that we have. If you think about what wealth is producing more than you consume and saving the rest in assets. Right, so we need to think structurally about that. And we produce more valuable things that we can export to the world and have a society that people can live on less.
Okay. Closing thoughts?
The concept of reducing inequality by government participation is, in my opinion, creating infrastructures for every level that people can benefit from it. And the people who have been given infrastructures should better make use of it as urgently and as innovatively as possible for them to move out from the poverty level and reduce inequality.
Okay. Let me take this 2 comments perhaps on Twitter. Amaju on Twitter says, China is a clear example, 850 million in 40 years. All the features of poverty China had, we have it, but we have the productive forces to be potent. If this is not done, prosperity and wealth is democratized. Let me take another comment. Capitalism unmitigated is failing globally. The global liberal order needs to be evaluated so as to democratize prosperity.